Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content.
So after the Browns beat the Miami Dolphins, there was a question that was asked of Kevin Stefanski, right? Given that he got a lot of flack last week for losing in Pittsburgh, that, maybe this win could change some people's minds about potentially wanting to fire Kevin Stefanski. And I want to approach this conversation as somebody who, on one hand, does appreciate and respect the body of work that Kevin has. I think there's a lot of folks here willing to act like Kevin accomplished nothing in Cleveland, or like Kevin wasn't the best head coach that most of us have seen coach the Cleveland Browns in our lifetime. It's not saying a ton. It's not going to put Kevin in the Hall of Fame, obviously, but it is something, right? Like, Kevin's not Mike Patton. He's not Eric Mangini. He is a much better coach and has a much better history in Cleveland than all of those guys combined. Two-time coach of the year, right? I want to approach this conversation as somebody who respects Kevin, who respects his body of work, but has also come to the realization as of now that you can't really bring him back next year. Now, I'll explain why I feel that way as this video goes on, but that's where I'm at, right? There's a lot of folks who just want to fire Kevin. They don't have any respect for him. They think he's all the problems with the Cleveland Browns, and they think firing him and hiring some other coach who acts completely different than him is going to solve all the problems. I've seen that logic play itself out with Cleveland Browns fandom and Cleveland Browns coaches, and I've not been impressed with the results over the last 20 years of that logic, right? I'm not trying to approach this as a reactionary kind of knee-jerk thing. I'm just trying to approach the conversation from a place of like, hey, like, I've thought about this. I respect the guy that you potentially are going to have to fire. Now, the reason I think ultimately you're going to have to fire Kevin Stefanski at the end of the year is simple. He's out of moves when it comes to fixing this offense. He's kind of played himself out of moves when it comes to fixing the offense, right? 3 years in a row, Browns have had 3 different offensive coordinators. 2023, they decide to move on from Alex Van Pelt to bring in Ken Dorsey to modernize the offense, right? To build it around Deshaun Watson. That was a utter incomplete failure. They fire Ken Dorsey. They bring in Tommy Rees, and the results are very similar to what they were with Ken Dorsey. You cannot sell anybody that the solution to fixing the offense is allowing Kevin Stefanski to keep his job as head coach, but just simply hiring another offensive coordinator. You could do it one time, and then you can sell me that the Ken Dorsey thing was such a mistake that you got to correct it. But once you go there, that has to work. So I've seen some people who really want to hang on to Kevin have suggested, like, hey, maybe we just let Kevin be a CEO type. And I can understand the appeal to that, because you watch like Kevin Stefanski's team on Sunday, and you watch a team like the Dolphins, Mike McDaniel's team, and you're like, wow, it certainly can get a lot worse than Kevin Stefanski right now. Like, as frustrated as we are with the lack of creativity with the offense and the inefficiency in the Browns offense, you look at a team like Miami, you're like, man, I don't want to look like that, right? Like, so I can understand that, but I don't think that's enough. You know what I mean? I don't think his body of work over the last 5 years is enough either to kind of justify sticking with him through all of these mistakes, sticking with him through 2 years of very inefficient offenses. And ultimately, the big thing, the damning part for him is, okay, let's say I want to stick with Kevin Stefanski. How am I supposed to believe he's going to fix it at this point? Is it hiring another offensive coordinator? What is it? Like, he's tried everything so far it has not worked. Like maybe the solution could be, oh, let's just get them better players. But part of why you were so excited to have Kevin Stefanski in the first place is you thought that he was somebody who can succeed even if the roster on the offensive side of the ball isn't the most amazing in the world. So if you're already conceding that he's not good enough to run his offense, we need to hire an offensive coordinator to take that responsibility off of him. Or if you're saying we can't trust Kevin to kind of elevate a group on some level, we have to overload the offense or load the offense with talent in order to get him to a place where he's going to be competitive. You are saying to yourself you don't believe in Kevin Stefanski. You just don't want to fire him. At that point, you might as well fire him. I just don't see a compelling argument for, if these issues on offense continue throughout the end of the season, to keep Kevin Stefanski. And I don't find the scenario that these problems get fixed. And I'll talk about it after the ad break. But I don't find the possibility that these problems get fixed over the course of the next 10 games to a convincing enough level to be high enough that it makes me feel like it's probable that he's going to keep his job. Right? I think what's probable is the offense gets to the end of the season. Maybe it's slightly improved, but it's not improved enough for you to really believe that there's going to be any difference in year 2 of Tommy Rees and Kevin Stefanski, and year 3 of Kevin having very inefficient, not great offenses. Now, maybe you're a true believer and you're saying to yourself, Quincy, we just need to hold on, get Kevin Stefanski an offensive line, and all that stuff that you liked about him is going to come back. And if this were a better offensive line class, if the Browns were better equipped to be a great offensive line team sooner than later, maybe that might be something that would be more appealing to me. But the reality is that we're looking at a 2 to 3 year rebuild on the offensive line. So I can't sit here and hold out for 3 years for Kevin to look like Kevin again, right? Like, you're just going to have to pivot at that point and find somebody who can put together an offense that doesn't require you having one of the best 10 offensive lines in the NFL. So again, I just don't see the probability and the possibility of it. So that's why last week's game really didn't convince me. Because yes, I think at the root, well, not the root, they attacked the aesthetics of the problem. And I think they were successful in beating the aesthetics of the problem, right? They put up 31 points. But if you dig into those 31 points, at the root of it, I just don't think that they really addressed anything in a meaningful way. Still a very inefficient running game, still a very inefficient pass game. Now, some of you might be wondering, well, what can Kevin do to keep his job in your mind? I'll tell you that, but before I do, got to thank my sponsor, Sleeper. So I talked about why it is that I don't think Kevin's going to be able to keep the job as head coach. And again, I'm not saying this is somebody who just is excited to fire Kevin Stefanski. I'm saying this is somebody that this realization bumps out, right? I really thought that Kevin could be the main coach for the Cleveland Browns for a long period of time. And it's very disappointing what the results have been this last season, and that we're coming to this conclusion, right? It doesn't mean that I'm just going to be desperate to the idea to hang on to it. If it's not working, it's obviously not working. You can't stick with it just because you want it to work. You know, like at some point you just got to have that big boy conversation and rip off the Band-Aid. Like, yeah, you might want it to work, but it's not. And that's okay. Right. And I think that's where I'm at with Kevin. There's just so many problems with the offense right now. The lack of efficiency, the fact that we haven't really had an in-house offensive player really develop over the last couple of years. Like, you look at the defense, and I have my criticisms of Jim Schwartz, right? He's not a perfect coordinator, but what Jim Schwartz has done successfully is develop some of the young guys on the roster as well, right? We've gotten Alex Wright to be a lot better under Jim Schwartz. Isaiah McGuire, Ronnie Hickman looks really good under Jim Schwartz. Carson Schlesinger already looking amazing under Jim Schwartz. Like, there are signs that say, hey, look, we're not only putting out good defenses, but we're developing some young players. And that's part of the reason why the defense has been able to be so good, despite the fact that we're still dealing with all the Watson stuff, right? There's like 3 undrafted free agents that are helping this defense right now, 4 if you count Aiden Huntington. You look at the offensive side of the ball, and yeah, you got some guys who really did well here, some veteran guys, right? Amari Cooper, Jerry Jeudy, right? You know, but if we're looking at like the younger guys that we took chances on to try to develop, either where the staff is not good at identifying young players, which is a problem, or the staff is not good at developing the young players they identify. Either way, there just has not been enough development there, right? Like wide receiver, even tight end wise. Like, yeah, they got a lot out of David Njoku, but then, you know, you get somebody like Harrison Bryant, and he did all right with them, but he never really ended up being an impactful player for you. Wide receiver wise, we know the kind of mess that's been. Offensive line wise, right? They've drafted some flyers here. DeJuan Jones got hurt. Maybe that's would have changed a lot for this offensive line, but you know, there's still some guys. There's Zach Zinter that they haven't been able to develop. Like, just you look at one side of the ball and you're seeing undrafted guys contribute. You're looking at another side of the ball and we're struggling to get 3rd, 4th, 5th round picks to be able to contribute for this team. And that's not a good sign. The 3 offensive coordinators in 3 seasons is not a good sign. It just screams that we're looking for answers on the offensive side of the ball and we're not able to find them. And at some point, you got to look at Kevin, who's been in charge of the offense during this period, and say he's not the answer. Real quick, just want to let you guys know Sleeper has a new offer here. They're offering a free $20 entry, no deposit required. And also, if you're a first-time user, you also will receive a 100% match on up to $100 when you use the promo code Worst Take. Again, $20 free, no deposit required. Plus, first-time users also receive a 100% deposit match up to $100. Join Sleeper. So I've explained why I think that it's unlikely that Kevin keeps his job. And that's unfortunate, right? You know, for me, at least it is. I want the Browns to have stability. I want the Browns to have their 2-time coach of the year end up being their long-term answer at head coach. But just too many problems have popped up. I talked about that in the first half of this video. And look, there's more to talk about on why it is that I think ultimately you can justify it at the end of the season, firing Kevin. But also, I do think Kevin does deserve to get the whole season, right? Like, give him the 10 games, let him coach out the rest of the season. Because what is clear to me is, you know, his team still respects him. I know the internet is convinced that the team hates him or whatever it is, but you look how they perform this week. You look how Joe Bitonio talks about Kevin Stefanski. There is still a strong layer of support within at least a faction of that locker room that's willing to show up for Kevin, right? So I'm not really looking at a team like Miami where it looks like, oh, the coach's message has completely gone stale, or the coach, they're revolting against their coach. It just doesn't seem like that kind of a situation. It doesn't seem like a situation where you're justified in firing your coach in the middle of the season, no matter how much people want to do it. And again, you can argue with me all you want about what you want to do, but I've not seen one good argument that shows me that firing your coach in the middle of the season leads to any kind of decent results, right? It's all kind of just like vibes and emotion based. It's not really like, oh, well, it actually helps you. Like, for as much as people say firing your coach in the middle season gives you a head start on coaching hires, I have not seen a lot of people be willing to follow up that take with examples of teams who are able to get great head coaching candidates hired early because they fired their head coach early. I don't think it's a helpful thing to fire your coach in the middle of the season if you can avoid it. And the Browns can clearly avoid to firing their head coach in the middle of the season. They don't have to do it. But if Kevin wants to avoid getting fired at the end of the season, what can he do in these 10 games to kind of change your mind? It's going to have to be that Kevin demonstrates that Kevin and Tommy Rees are enough to fix the problems on offense. Because I said it before, the answer cannot be, we got to hire a new offensive coordinator. The answer cannot be, hey, Kevin's going to take a step back. We're going to hire Mike McDaniel to run the off. That can't be the answer, and you keep Kevin Stefanski. If that is the answer, that you don't trust Kevin to fix it, you don't trust Tommy Rees and Kevin to fix it, then you got to get rid of them both, right? Because what are we doing at that point? So if you're the Browns, that's what you have to see. You have to see Kevin fix the offense. Now, what do I mean by fix the offense, right? Do I mean I want more points? Not necessarily. Obviously, I want more points, but I think it's how those points get scored, right? The Browns scored 31 points this week versus the Miami Dolphins, but they got outgained by the Miami Dolphins by 20 yards. It wasn't an offensive juggernaut performance by any stretch of the imagination. I don't think anybody is willing to tell you that the Browns offense exploded for 31 points. That's not what happened, right? The Browns offense capitalized on great opportunities afforded to them from the defense, which is not nothing. Right? Because I've seen offenses, Browns offenses, get gifted opportunities and not do a lot with them. So they capitalize on the opportunities that were in front of them. I give you credit for that, but it's not an offensive juggernaut performance, right? What I'm talking about when I'm saying, hey, Kevin has to prove that he's an answer. This offensive efficiency stuff has to be fixed. See, the thing that got people excited about Kevin Stefanski, that got people around the league talking about Kevin Stefanski and how great of an offensive mind he is and why he has such a great reputation that if you even whisper that Kevin Stefanski might be fired, Dan Orlovsky pops up in your your Twitter replies telling you you're an idiot, somebody will hire him. The reason he has that level of respect is because of the level of efficiency he was able to obtain with the Browns offenses from 2020 to 2023. He was a very efficient offensive mind there, right? We're talking about 7 yards per attempt, good EPA numbers, especially when healthy with a healthy offensive line or a decent quarterback. He was able to get a lot out of offenses that didn't have a ton of firepower behind it. Also, the thing that got people super excited about Kevin Stefanski was the run efficiency with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt and how the Browns were running that offensive line and offense. It was some of the most efficient run offense stuff that you've ever seen, right? And I know a lot of people go, well, Nick Chubb was just covering up a lot of mistakes. I think that's a little revisionist. I think the Browns offensive line was also executing at a high level that just allowed the Browns to be so much more creative than they can be now when they can't really trust guys to execute at the level that they were trusting guys to execute in 2020. And I think that's part of the problem with Kevin is that I don't think he's adjusted well to the reality of not having the best pieces on offense, right? Like he hasn't really found the way to make what he wants to do work when he doesn't have the best pieces on the offensive line. When Wyatt Teller isn't playing at an all-pro level, and then it kind of always feels like it's falling apart because one guy misses his thing, and that's the thing, right? Like the run game's built on a house of cards, and if you're not a good enough offensive line to hold up that house of cards, then something's always going to fall. And it's always going to come tumbling down. And that's what's been happening with the Browns run game for the last couple of years. He has to demonstrate that he can adjust to that reality. That's why I'm not really sympathetic to the idea of, oh, well, he has bad personnel right now. He needs to demonstrate that he can adjust to that reality, that he can make the most out of not having a great offensive line, that he can make the most out of not having great weapons, right? Like that's what he has to adjust to and also demonstrate that he can get ahead of the curve here. Feels like we've been left behind. So in these 10 games, if this offense gets much more efficient, and that's a product of the run game being a lot more efficient, the passing game being more efficient, and we leave the end of the season thinking to ourselves, wow, I was skeptical at first, but Kevin got a really efficient offense together in the last 8 weeks of the season with Dylan Gabriel and KT Leviston playing left tackle. The run EPA is back up, all this stuff. You can sit there and legitimately say the problem is solved because you're not just firing Kevin Stefanski potentially just to fire him. I want to reiterate this point. The only reason to fire Kevin Stefanski is because you're trying to solve a problem, and the problem is the offense. So if Kevin solves the problem on offense, then you don't need to fire him. But if the problem still exists and Kevin is still here, well, then Kevin does have to go. Because that's what we're trying to do at the end of the day. We're not just trying to get somebody fired. I know some people are just on the I want somebody fired thing. But if you're the Browns, you're trying to actually solve a problem, I would at least hope. And if the problem doesn't exist, then nobody needs to be fired. But right now, I find that hard to believe. So that's where I'm at with the head coach right now. Let me know where you guys are. I think this week versus the New England Patriots, it's going to be an interesting week because you could have beaten the Miami Dolphins last week and not scored a lot of points, let's be honest, but they're a very beatable team, right? And there's a couple of games this year where you could have had bad offensive play and still been able to win. And I think there would still be some questions about, hey, how bad's his offense with Kevin right now? This game this week, I don't think you're going to be able to win without being a decent offense, right? Look at how Drake May's playing. He's playing really clean, efficient football right now. He's looking like the next guy to emerge. And to beat that guy on the road in New England, you're going to have to put together a pretty strong offensive performance. And that's going to be like if they're able to win those kind of games and Kevin's able to put together game plans that can demonstrate that he can solve those kind of problems and get over the hurdle that he's been trying to hurdle over the last couple of years, then all of a sudden that's a lot more appealing. But just scoring 31 points because the offense executed and didn't mess up, it's not really it. Like open wide receivers that Dylan's not throwing the ball to, that's not going to be enough to save Kevin's job. You need to get it to a point, and Kevin needs to demonstrate that he could get this offense to a point to where they can be successful and they have a floor because they have Kevin Stefanski, right? That doesn't mean that your floor has to be top 10. I'm not asking him to be Kyle Shanahan, but I do think that if Kevin is truly like the guy that people want him to be, Andrew Berry compared him once to Andy Reid, well, then you can't have worse than like the 26th offense in the NFL, right? Like you got to be better than that on a consistent basis, or else are you really what we think you are? Or are we just hoping? That's my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have a better night. Peace.